You know, when we talk about the greatest military commanders in history, is there such a thing as a perfect general? I mean, a certified, undisputed GOAT who is literally undefeated. Well, today we're talking about a man who didn't just win battles, he redefined warfare and built a legend that still echoes through the centuries. Okay, let's get into it.
So get this number right here, that's the number of major battles he fought. 41 times he led his men into the thick of it, usually against the superpowers of his day. We're talking the colossal Byzantine, Roman, and Sasanian Persian empires. And he was almost always outnumbered, always under incredible pressure.
And this number? Well, that's the number of times he lost. That's right, 0. A perfect 41-0 record. For 15 years, the man never, ever tasted defeat on the battlefield. It's just insane.
So how does someone get a title that epic? It comes from this very quote. The Prophet Muhammad himself called him Saifullah, which translates to the Sword of Allah. This wasn't just some cool nickname, it was like the ultimate divine endorsement.
And look, this unstoppable quality, it was always there. Even before he converted to Islam, his military genius was just undeniable. At the Battle of Ohud, for example, he pulled off this game-changing cavalry move that completely turned the tide against the very people he would later lead.
So, how did he do it? How did he keep that wild winning streak going? Well, I'll tell you this much, it wasn't just luck. His legend was forged in moments of absolutely impossible strategy, unshakable faith, and just sheer brutal strength. Let's start with his insane desert crossing. Okay, picture this. It's the year 634. Khalid is in Iraq, and he gets an urgent message to go reinforce the Muslim armies way over in Syria. The only problem? The main road is completely locked down by heavily armed Roman garrisons. Any other general would wait, but Khalid, he decided to take a shortcut.
And when I say shortcut, I mean he chose to march his 9,000-man army straight through this absolute hellscape. His own officers begged him not to, saying that even a lone traveler would attempt it at the peril of his life. But Khalid knew that the element of surprise was everything.
So for 5 grueling days they marched. By the end, their water was completely gone. The army was facing total disaster. Their guide, Rafah, could barely see, his eyes almost burned blind by the glare of the sun, and he's desperately trying to find a landmark he hadn't laid eyes on in 30 years. Just when all hope seemed lost, he spots the trunk of an old thorn tree. He tells the men, "Dig here," and miraculously, water gushes up from the parched earth, saving the entire army from certain death.
I mean, can you even imagine pulling that off? This was so incredible that historians look back and say it had never been done before and it would never be done again. It wasn't just a march, it was a psychological bomb that cemented his reputation. He basically appeared out of thin air, completely blindsiding the Roman forces in Syria.
But Khalid's success wasn't just about brilliant tactics. He also had, let's call it, a secret weapon, a kind of blessed accessory.
Now Khalid was a physically imposing warrior, no doubt about it, but he truly believed his invincibility came from his red battle cap. See, after a pilgrimage, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had his head shaved, and Khalid managed to get some of the blessed hairs. He had them woven right into his cap, and from that day on, he refused to go into battle without it.
This was the promise attached to it, and he took it so seriously that during the massive Battle of Yarmouk, he dropped the cap and actually halted the fighting to frantically search for it. I mean, think about that. He stops a whole battle to find his hat because he believed his entire undefeated streak depended on its blessing.
And don't think for a second that Khalid was one of those generals who commanded from the rear, pointing at maps. Oh no, this guy was a frontline warrior. He would actively seek out the enemy's greatest champions, just so he could personally crush their morale.
So check this out. At the Battle of Emesa, he squares off against this massive Roman general, a guy they said was roaring like a lion. In the middle of the duel, Khalid's own sword shatters against the Romans' heavy armor. For anyone else, that's a death sentence. Game over.
But not for Khalid. He just drops the broken blade, closes the distance, and grabs the giant in this crushing bear hug. He squeezes with so much force that he literally splinters the general's ribs, killing him with his bare hands. Then he just picks up the Roman sword and keeps on fighting. It's absolutely unreal. So after a career of just unmatched conquest, you'd think he'd go out in some final, epic blaze of glory, right? Well, a strange fate awaited the Sword of Allah. He didn't fall on the battlefield. Instead, he found himself on his deathbed, completely heartbroken.
As he lay dying, he showed a friend his body, and it was basically a roadmap of his entire life as a warrior. It was covered in hundreds of scars, from swords, spears, and arrows. He pointed out that there wasn't a spot on his body the size of your hand that was unmarked by battle.
And this was his cry of anguish. He said, "I have sought martyrdom in 100 battles. Why could I not have died in battle?" For a man who lived by the sword, dying peacefully in bed felt like a total failure. He wanted that highest honor for a warrior, to die a martyr, and it was being denied to him.
But his friend gives him this incredibly profound explanation. He says, "Khalid, you were named the Sword of Allah. If you had been killed by an enemy, it would mean that Allah's sword had been broken, and that could never be allowed to happen. His invincibility, it turns out, was preordained."
When he finally passed away, even his contemporary and occasional rival, Caliph Omar, gave him the ultimate tribute. He said, "Women will no longer be able to give birth to the likes of Khalid bin Walid. That's the highest praise imaginable, admitting he was truly one of a kind."
And that's the beautiful irony of his story, isn't it? The most fearsome, unstoppable warrior of his era, a man who lived for the fight, was destined to win his final victory not with a sword in his hand, but peacefully in his own bed.
So what truly forges a legend like this? Is it strategic genius, divine blessing, just raw physical power, or an unbreakable will? When you look at the story of Khalid bin Walid, it seems like the answer is pretty clear. It's all of the above.